At first sight, you'd be excused for thinking the criminal way in which Spanish authorities dealt with the Catalonian independence referendum is a matter merely for Madrid. But it's not. The scenes of police firing rubber bullets into a crowd of innocent civilians, beating them, and dragging one woman out of a polling booth by her hair will have alarm bells ringing across the entire continent and could be part of derailing the whole European project. Paying lip service, EU officials issued weak appeals for calm. Yeah, right, that'll work. More than 800 people were injured by this state-sanctioned thuggery. But independence for Catalonia breaks one of the EU's most cherished principles. If Spain lost Catalonia, it's highly likely the Basque region would be next. Then would Belgium lose Flanders, France, Corsica, Italy, the Venice region, and Germany, Bavaria? As separatist movements across much of Europe watch events in Catalonia with great interest, Brussels looks on with nothing less than fear and loathing.
I agree with you about the EU position, and of course it's in their interest to keep a united country. I think that the EU should have been way more stronger in condemning what was going on from the police and the violence. And I know they've come out and said a couple of bits and pieces, but I don't think their response was strong enough. But as part of my research, actually, into this debate, I spoke to a couple of my friends, one of which lives in Barcelona, just to get a feel for what it's like over there. And I'm quite interested by how what I'm seeing presented in the media and how that differs to what she's experiencing. And she is a lady, she describes herself as the silent majority. She's not in favour of independence, but so afraid to vocalise that. So my personal perspective is that these people should be allowed a legal referendum. I think everyone has the right to be able to express their desire for their country. I believe in democracy. So I do believe that actually the Constitution should be amended. It all should be done properly to allow a proper, official, legal referendum about the future of this country. That's the first thing. The second thing that my friend was expressing to me is the amount of bullying. That's the only word I can really put onto it, really. What she's experiencing, just this torrent of information and pressure to vote for independence. And, you know, there's talk at the moment that the leader of Catalonia is just going to somehow declare independence over the next few days, and she's terrified.
But how different is that?
Carol, coming to you in a second. Let me just, for viewers who just need an idea, let's turn to a Sky News report now by Mark Stone.
A peaceful sit-in by the public here suddenly switched. They're just firing. They're firing. OK, so this is what they're firing. This is what the guy did. Tell me what you saw.
I mean, they started shooting these balls. They are apparently just to be thrown to the floor, but they were throwing it to the heads. So they're crazy.
Shocking scenes, by the way. Carol, to get this back on track, what do you think it means for the EU?
I think this is the EU's worst nightmare. Their ethos is one state, one currency, one army. This is totally against everything. And they're seeing this happening all over Europe. They're seeing people increasingly want their independence. They want to rule themselves. You know, they're beginning to see that, you know, the EU, this big faceless, unelected lump of people, they're beginning to see that they don't understand their individual history, their traditions, how they got there. And people want that back again. You know, there's been a resurgence of nationalism, the good kind, where people actually want freedom and independence and the luxury of ruling themselves. I mean, and this must be terrifying for Europe, because it was there before. It's happening. Belgium, Flemish people want to separate. It's happening in France. Corsican people want to separate. They must be tearing the hair out. And the thing that the EU hates more than anything is change and uncertainty, and this is all over Europe. Isn't
it true that this homogenisation when people are seeking independence, it's really alien to what most people would see?
Well, you saw it with Scotland, didn't you? You saw the EU come out and say, basically take the side of the British government and say, if you leave Scotland, there's no guarantee you get back in anywhere near the future. And I thought that was unnecessary to say that. And that's what they've said about Catalonia.
But this is because they fear the breakup, though, Greg.
Yeah, but I think you're rather sort of dragging the EU into it. I think what was the most amazing thing about this was why would the Spanish government... I mean, this was going to be an unofficial referendum.
Absurd.
Why would the Spanish government send in a thug police force
Yep.
to drag beat up old ladies and God knows who else? And you just think, what did you do that for? You have turned it from being... well, pretty irrelevant in some ways, into being a big issue. And then the King comes in.
King Felipe talks about the irresponsible... Can you imagine, God forbid, things kicked off in Glasgow? Do you honestly think the Queen would just come on an appeal for calm, not blame the recklessness of one party?
Well, you remember during the Scottish referendum, when there was an attempt to say the Queen was on one side or the other, the palace went mad and said, we are not political. But as for the King, I think he did himself a lot of damage.
Terrible.
And I think the Spanish government have done themselves a lot of damage internationally.
Yes. Afua, just before I bring you in, I know you're a big fan of the EU. Can I just put it to you, that this great brotherhood and fraternity that I mentioned, and it's all wonderful, and we're all going to be one great people, and we all celebrate, and the European Commission, which is a sort of guardian of human rights for all European citizens, says absolutely nothing, as some citizens, Spanish citizens, are beaten with clubs by others. So that's how we do it in the EU. In the UK, as Grace just said, we have a debate, we have a referendum, it gets very heated, the people have their vote, and then both sides say, well done, you won, we lost, see you next time. Afua.
I think the scenes in Barcelona were horrific. I mean, to see Spanish police beating up fire officers, absolutely remarkable in Europe in 2017. I think the EU has handled it incredibly badly, and it's undermining its legitimacy. It claims to stand for rule of law, for respect for democracy, for dialogue and political solutions, and instead it's basically been silent.
So is it threatened?
So yes, I do think it threatens its legitimacy, and I think it's in denial, and Spain is in denial, and the EU is in denial, because look, we know now that globalisation hardens local and national identities. That's what's happened here with Brexit. That's what's been happening in Scotland. That's what's happening in Corsica and in Basque and in Catalonia. You know, that is a phenomenon that's happening worldwide, and you cannot dig your head in the sand and just think if you send in the cavalry, it will go away. So I'm not Spanish. I don't have a vested interest in what's happening in Catalan, but I'm abhorred by images of force used against people who are trying to express themselves. And if you listen to the government of Catalonia, they've said, we have been trying to have a dialogue about this since 2010. We have not been listened to. This has been a last resort for them.
The one thing, there are parallels between take away the violence, the hideous violence, take away that didn't happen here. But the thing that both of these referendums have in common is that the cultural and political elites of Spain and of this country showed complete disdain for the will of the people. The cultural elites, they wanted, in both countries, to try to crush democracy and public spirit. In both countries, they have used that excuse, the reason that we made the vote that we did here because we didn't have enough information. They've used exactly the same argument in Spain.
I really want to bring Greg back in, with due respect, because you're the one person I think I haven't quite turned yet on this. Let's look and see what people have said. Guy Verhofstadt condemns the violence and then says, on the one hand, the separatist parties went forward with a so-called referendum that was forbidden by the Constitutional Court. The former Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis has tweeted, what message does the Commission's implicit support of violence against peaceful crowds send to authoritarian governments in Hungary and Poland? I know I haven't got you over yet, but this is a threat, Greg.
No, I think the EU should have shut up. They should. They are not a political operation, and they did say in one of their early statements. No, they're not a political operation in the terms of
other countries' politics.
They should not get involved in other countries' politics.
But they supposedly stand for a set of values, which is what being part of the European project.
Well, what they did was they immediately threatened the Catalans that if you leave, you won't be in the European. Let me read this.
Well, that's what they said to the Scots.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Let me just read this. This is what has been said. This is an internal matter for Spain that has to be dealt with in line with the constitutional order of Spain. It's a referendum. If a referendum were to be organised in line with the Spanish constitution, it would mean that the territory leaving would find itself outside the European Union. This is the threat. Beyond the purely legal aspects of this matter, the Commission believes that these are times for unity and stability, not divisiveness and fragmentation. That's getting involved.
But before,
they shouldn't get involved.
I like the way, Nick, you're trying to kind of cast me as some kind of EU enthusiast who's had to betray the EU on this. No, I'm not an EU enthusiast, and I think it's interesting if you look at...
Is this Afua Hirsch or is this someone else?
I am a Remain enthusiast. That's not the same. I don't get out of bed in the morning doing a little EU dance.
I bet you do.
I'd love to watch it.
I bet you've got a poster of Juncker on your wall and everything. Come on.
Listen, let's not visualise that, people. What I'm saying is, I think it's interesting that an independent Catalan would want to be part of the EU. An independent Scotland would want to to be part of the EU. That says something. These countries still think there is a value in EU membership. I don't think that these two things are irreconcilable, national identity
How do you know
and
Catalonia
EU
wants to
membership.
remain within the EU? How do we know that?
Because one of their grievances has been that the EU has said that they wouldn't necessarily be able to have membership if they were independent.
Yeah, but who says they want to be a member of the EU?
We don't know, but they haven't rejected it. So I don't think Nick can get away with saying this proves that the EU is a doomed...
No, it seems to me...
I'm going to our pledge, President.
And so it goes on and on.